Obviously, the SSPX is a movement with which I have many strong disagreements. In the first place, morally, it is obviously a cesspool of far-right thought. I think, for example, of this infamous Holocaust denier, Bishop Richard Williams.
I believe there were no gas chambers.
So he got suspended by the SSPX eventually. If you go into any comment section under an SSPX-related social media post, however, you will come to find that they continue to have many more such figures in their ranks. They are able to exist in these spaces without much challenge. Theologically and liturgically too, I think the SSPX gets many things wrong. And I'm not just talking about the fact that they used multiple different liturgical colors simultaneously. Very strange. I am certainly not on their side. However, I wouldn't be a true ecumenist if I could not point to anything good, a gold nugget of enlightenment within the fabric of their error. Obviously, the greatest thing about them is that their liturgy is much more reverent than the new order of the Mass. I think most people can see that. If you go to an ordinary Catholic parish today, their Mass will be a lot less reverent, often even rather clumsy. This stands, of course, in the wider context of a war on beauty. In that war, traditionalists are clearly on the right side. But I think there is also something good about the SSPX that many are unable to see. Their conceptualization of obedience is something that I would describe as sensible. In the past couple of days, I've seen a lot of people online ridicule the absurdity of how their newly consecrated bishops are disobeying the Pope by performing a ritual in which they explicitly make a vow of obedience to that very same Pope. Yes, it's indeed paradoxical, but I think their nuanced understanding of obedience, which is what allows them to make their vows, is actually rather sensible, and I think deserves, at the very least, to be understood. Say, for example, you have a friend who is suicidal, and this friend calls you and requests that you help them in their suicide attempt. What would a loyal friend do? Would a loyal friend pull the trigger? Obviously not. Why not? Because you don't care about your friend's wants? Your friend wants to die. Why are you not killing your friend? That's a bit rude, isn't it? Except, does your friend really want to die? On the surface level, of course. But I think the correct understanding is that there is a deeper level on which they want to live. It's just this mental health crisis that hinders that part of the psyche that has the will to live. By saving your friend's life, you do what they actually truly want. In a sense, I think in the worldview of the SSPX, which is one where the church is going through a serious crisis, their obedience to the church functions a bit like the loyalty to a suicidal friend. They essentially filter out the crisis before obeying. I think, not just in the church, but in all facets of life, this more nuanced interpretation of obedience is better. In a way that is relatively comparable to how you shouldn't kill a suicidal friend, it's not good to obey your superiors in moments when they give orders that are clearly self-destructive and that wouldn't have been issued if they had sufficient knowledge and were of sound mind. And lots of people in positions of power are not of sound mind, unfortunately. Many of the men on the top are clearly mentally ill. It is to the benefit of Elon Musk, for example, that the people directly below him are aware that he is not quite okay. So they know to not always listen to his strange ideas. If you are in such a situation, obedience, in the conventional sense of the word, is just not really an option, even if you value obedience conceptually. Of course, You could argue that such behavior cannot be reasonably defined as obedience, and therefore the SSPX's episcopal vows are still silly. And that is fair. I won't fight you on that. But it could definitely be considered a form of loyalty. I think they call it obedience mostly because they need to. The definition has to be stretched a little so they can think of themselves as being in the church. Unlike many radical traditionalists, such as we find in the SSPX, I think, for example, that it is really good that Pope Leo apologized for slavery. It is very good that slowly we see this awareness grow, that the church can be in error, and has been in error, with destructive results. And ironically, that is precisely why I strongly agree with the SSPX on the fact that they can materially disobey the Pope in a crisis situation. There have been many bad popes in history. Many remember John XII as the worst one. He turned the Lateran Palace into a brothel. But did he really turn the Lateran Palace into a brothel? With his own hands? No, not with his own hands, but, like all rulers do, with the hands of people obedient to him. The obedient people are certainly not always on the right side of history. And similarly, obedient bishops accepted Clement XI's Papal Bull Unigenitus, which, among other condemnations, condemns the position that the reading of sacred scripture is for all. Common sense today, but the church in that day did not see it that way yet. Disobedient bishops appealed it, and suffered excommunications as a result. As far as I know, most of these excommunications were never lifted. And despite Roman Catholic theology developing, and we now have the Bible in a Year podcast with Father Mike Smits, Unigenitus was never rescinded. Rome and its devotees usually don't admit errors. Roman Catholic apologists even will routinely deny that access to scripture was even ever restricted at all. And they are not corrected by their bishop. If Pope Leo is big enough to apologize for slavery, perhaps he can still apologize for this too and lift a couple of excommunications. I'm sure the dead will rejoice. By the way, I don't give a shit if you believe that Unigenitus should be accepted on the basis of what you think it rightly condemns. Sure, some condemnations contained in Unigenitus can be argued for, but no one today can earnestly reject all 101 propositions anymore, and therefore you must recognize its error. Closer to the present, the Epstein files. Oh, the Epstein files. Though they remain ambiguous about the exact nature of the relationship between Epstein and Pope John Paul II, make it abundantly clear that at least at one point the Pope was being blackmailed by Ghislaine Maxwell, likely with a lewd image. This is something I already made a video about earlier. So in a recent memory too has the Roman See been compromised. There is interpretive room to minimize this, but you cannot deny it completely. It is unthinkable, of course, for many today that another truly wicked pope like John XII would rise. There is no reason this wouldn't be able to happen, however, unless you take this as a natural law, which of course is only tenable if you simply don't know that wicked popes have existed. To be deep in church history is to cease to be an ultramontanist. For how can you believe in the indefectibility of the Pope when the pornocracy has happened? You think that if you interrupted John the 12th while he was fucking a prostitute and asked him a theological question, that he would even be able to give you any coherent answer at all? How can you submit to a man who is functionally completely outside the very faith that he is supposed to oversee? You cannot be the head, if even the Pope were the head, if you aren't even a member. Sure, Pope Leo is a swell guy, and I surely don't mind that you are obedient to him. But this can change. The type of shit we saw in the Middle Ages can happen again, because humans are still the same. Then you must disobey the decrees of the Pope, so as to be loyal to the gospel of Jesus Christ. In this, I think, the SSPX, despite all their evils, can be our example. It is not right to scold them for violating the erroneous principle of absolute and mechanical, mindless and apathetic, blind obedience to the Pope. That is not very wise of you. How did it come to be that the liberal party in the Roman Catholic Church is now so ultramontane? It used to be the other side that thought that way.